I'm going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councillor Weber. Here. Councillor Mullen. Here. Councillor Rodley. Here. Councillor Blackwell. Here. Councillor Doyle. Here. Councillor Pictionary.
Here, thank you. We have one item in this meeting tonight. Housing diversity tax exemption credit, Katie Carroll.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Carroll. I'm the city's housing analyst. I'm here tonight to talk to you about a property tax exemption that the council is considering that staff has been calling the housing diversity tax exemption, or HDTE. You may be familiar with this as the multiple unit property tax exemption, or MUPD, as it's called in Eugene and Cottage Grove.
Okay.
Okay. So a little bit of background on this. This is a tax exemption that the state enables cities to adopt to incentivize the development of multiple unit housing near transit and in core areas. And the idea behind this is that by exempting some of the property taxes for the first several years of a project's operation, it can help make the project pencil and help us get more this type of development than we otherwise would. It is an application-based program, so the city would need to set program guidelines and standards, which is what we'll be talking about tonight. And then ultimately, every application for this tax exemption would come to you at the council level for a decision. This tax exemption can be used for affordable housing, but staff is anticipating it would mainly be used for market rate housing. The city does already have the low income rental housing property tax exemption, or LRPT, that is kind of more advantageous for affordable housing. So that's why we think this would be more for market rate. Council has been considering this as part of its housing strategy since 2017 and has had several meetings. Most recently at the March 13th work session on this, the council reviewed the areas of Springfield where this tax exemption would be available and kind of affirmed prior direction on those areas. And then also discussed whether to cap this program and directed staff to not cap it at this time, but to provide language that would allow the council to institute a cap at any time. So you saw this at your last meeting, but these are the areas of Springfield that council is considering for this tax exemption. Under state statute, we have to identify where this would be available, and it has to be areas that are within a quarter mile of transit. So one requirement of this tax exemption is that applicants have to provide at least one public benefit as determined by the city. So state statute gives some examples of what public benefits could be, but there's a lot of latitude for us to decide what that means in Springfield. So kind of the three main things that the council will need to determine are, first, if the city will specify the benefits that applicants need to provide as part of their project, or if we'll give applicants choices. Second, how many public benefits an applicant would need to include in their project to be eligible for this tax exemption. And then third, what actually counts as a public benefit. And then as a reminder, if council moves forward with this tax exemption, the city will need to seek support from other taxing districts that equal at least 51% of the tax levy in order to have this kind of apply to the full tax amount and not just the city's share. And this public benefit requirement is one area where we think that those other taxing districts will probably have input and feedback for the city. So the conversation on this tonight, staff is just viewing as kind of an introductory, getting some direction from council, and then we would come back to you with kind of more details and more definition around this in a future meeting. So getting in kind of to those first two things that council needs to determine. So overall, what is the structure of this requirement that council wants? So the city can make this more rigid by specifying exactly what developers need to do, or more flexible by giving some options. In past meetings where council has discussed this, they had indicated support for keeping this program flexible for developers. So what staff is proposing is having this be structured as sort of a tiered list with items in list A and list B, and then asking developers to pick at least one option from list A to provide, and then a second option from list A or B. So the list A items would be sort of the like higher priority, bigger ticket public benefits. And this is similar to how the city of Bend has structured their public benefit requirement. And it's kind of nice because it combines this idea of giving choices, but it still allows the city to point developers towards what are Springfield's biggest priorities and allows us to kind of differentially weigh public benefits. And then in terms of the number of public benefits, other cities that we looked at require between 1 and 6. So asking developers to provide 2 is still on the more flexible end of things, but staff feels like this is kind of a good balance between not asking for so much that we're making this program so onerous that developers won't want to use it, but still making sure that we are getting something for the community in return for exempting taxes. Did you have a question there before I moved on from this slide?
I may have a question depending on what the next slide is.
Okay. Should I go into it?
Yes.
Okay.
My question's on the slide here.
Okay, perfect. And then the third thing is determining, okay, well, what qualifies as a public benefit? So staff has put together this initial recommendation list, which is 13 categories of public benefits. And the way that we identified these was first looking at, well, what do other cities have as their public benefits? And then sending out a survey to Department of Public Works supervisors and the economic development team to get some initial feedback of what do we think the highest priorities for Springfield are. And then doing some follow-up meetings with staff and looking into whether there's adopted policy support for each of these benefits. And then we also did try and include some things that I'd remembered council had previously mentioned wanting to explore as part of this. And then finally did also receive some initial feedback already from a developer, Phil Farrington, after your March meeting. We tried to incorporate some of that here as well. And these are all further detailed in attachment 2 of your packet. And I'm planning on going through those in a little bit more detail in a second. But in the packet, they're categorized as list A or list B items. And the way we were sort of thinking about that when we were weighing them was first, is there adopted policy support for this? How much policy support is there? Would this public benefit or could it be made publicly available? And then finally, is it something that would be likely to extend beyond the exemption period? So like physical improvements that are part of the building would be an example of something that would extend beyond that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you have parking in a structure listed here, right? And I know, and then you've got EV stations. Can we still require that based on what the CFEC rules tell us that we could do?
I would look to maybe Sandy Belson to answer that. I'm not as familiar with CFEC. But I would assume so because it's a discretionary requirement.
Right, so our code would not require parking, but as a benefit for getting a tax exemption, the city could say one way that you could meet that public benefit is by providing parking in a structure. We didn't go as far as saying providing parking at all, which is someplace you could go, but trying to make these compact type developments near transit. I'm saying that, well, if it's in a structure, then that's gonna keep that same form. But that's only because they're getting something from the city. But it's not a code requirement under CFEC.
Okay, and Victoria, did you want to ask your EV question?
Well, yeah, I understood that the EV is something that's wrapped up with CFEC. So how is that a benefit to them if it's already something that they're going to have to do anyway?
So CFEC, I don't know if we said climate friendly equitable communities, that's the rules that came out of the Department of Land Conservation and Development as approved by the Land Conservation and Development Commission. So the EV aspect of that is that they're EV ready, meaning the conduit is in place, but there's no requirement that there actually be an ability to charge. So this would be addressing that actually you have the capacity to charge the electric vehicles, not just the conduit being ready to charge.
All right, thank you.
So to that point, for all of these as applicable, developers would be required to go kind of above and beyond what the code already requires. So it's not just sort of a check the box item. And then the bottom right hand, I have bolded here in the program guidelines. Staff has also included this other option. Where if a developer wants to propose something that's not on the list of public benefits, there's flexibility for the city to consider that, because there may be things that make sense in certain circumstances or certain sites that aren't included. So wanted to point that out so that the council doesn't feel like we need to identify the universe of possibilities, because there is that flexibility built in. So kind of focusing more on what is the highest priority for Springfield.
Michelle,
I have a question on this.
Yeah.
The list A. How does LTD factor into the mass transit use options? As far as installation or enhancement of a bus shelter, or anything that kind of connects to that mass transit option?
So I relied pretty heavily on one of our transportation engineers for those transit related ones. And I think his thinking in that was, what are things that are sort of within the city's purview of controlling? I'm not totally sure of the relationship, but I think it's sort of this dynamic of like the city helps LTD determine where the stops are. So for a shelter, that may be like, is there an existing stop that doesn't have a shelter, but maybe just has like a bench or a pole, that they could enhance that.
Okay, so as part of this planning process for the application and, all of that upfront work, I guess my question is, would we be seeking input from LTD as to how that impacts their system and where they would want those improvements? If we're gonna say this is a benefit,
Yeah.
it's only a benefit if LTD, like in my mind, if
Agrees.
LTD agrees that that's a benefit.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm gonna get into it a little bit more later, but part of what we would be wanting to do is require developers to attend something called the development initiation meeting before applying, so we could have those discussions of like, okay, what makes sense at this site, because a transportation benefit may not make sense
Okay,
there.
That's,
or it may
yeah,
be
that
a high
helps.
priority
It's just to
for
make
us.
sure it's part of that upfront.
Yeah.
Conversation, and we're including all of the people that need to be involved in that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think that was all I had on that slide. So I'm just gonna preview the questions and then get into talking through what these various public benefits are. So the first question that staff has on this part of the tax exemption is, should staff move forward with the proposed public benefit structure? So that's the pick 2 from this tiered list. And then the second question being, what public benefits should be eligible for the program? So I do have printed copies if anybody wants one of that. Okay, perfect. So then going through these various public benefits in attachment 2. So the first one that I have on here is affordable housing, and that has list A or list B. It can kind of be in either of those, and that would be dependent on the percentage of total units that meet the affordability requirement. And how staff is proposing to define that is at the 80% area median income level or below. And that the way a developer would meet that is either through holding those units for a master lease with a nonprofit, housing choice vouchers, which are Section 8, or a similar housing subsidy program. And if you're not familiar with master leases, that is where the landlord would basically lease directly to the nonprofit, and then they would put clients in those units through sort of a sublease, and they would be receiving services and assistance that way. And so for all 3 of those options, theoretically, it doesn't really require a developer to reduce the cost of rent, because these pay a market rent. Now, how HUD defines market rent and how a private developer defines that may not be totally congruent. So they may be providing some subsidy in that sense. But this has kind of been a need that's been identified by service providers in the community. Is we have clients, we have funds, we just don't have somewhere to put people. But then also as part of the affordable housing, having an option. Yeah.
Quick question. When you started this presentation, looking at projects for market rate. So why is even affordable housing an option?
So I believe that in the March meeting, that had been one of the things that Counselor Broadley had flagged as wanting to look at. It's also something that ranked pretty highly in the staff survey. So this would be, like I said, I think an affordable housing developer could use this tax exemption. It's just when you look at that compared to the LRPD program, the LRPD is a 20-year tax exemption. This is fewer than that. So that had been the reason for including it.
So it's really not market rate. It can be, but it's set up or being set up for affordable housing as being a benefit to the developer.
So this is just one of
Right.
several options. So they could choose not to do this and then make it like a market.
But I'm looking at the other options.
Uh-huh.
And so far, that list, if I was a developer, it'd not be very attractive. Makes sense?
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for feedback on.
Right.
So if, I'm not sure if,
Well,
sorry.
are you good with your questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're gonna circle back to the discussion here in a second. Beth,
That was kind of my question too, and why would a builder not use the LRPTA then and use this, because that's a 20-year tax
Exemption.
So, right, so why have the two? It seems like,
So the LRPD is set at the 60% AMI level. And then this also might be appealing to someone that wants to provide a few units, do like a mixed income project and provide a few affordable units and not do like the whole project affordably.
Corey,
Yeah, that was the part that I was gonna say that I think that we talked about last time. It's the trying to get to the kind of mixed socioeconomic community development. So the LRPD is like you could do an entire project as affordable housing, and this is how do you mix in some affordable units? And so if you were doing basically a market rate building and built in some affordable units along with that, would help to qualify for that. So it's not an all or nothing, it's a like both and.
Steve,
The property tax exemption. And I think you said that 51% of the affected have to sign into that. What about the urban renewal area? They already do that.
The urban renewal area.
Urban renewal taxing, the entities give a part of their taxing goes into the urban renewal fund.
Yes, so this would also be if 51% of the taxing districts agreed to it, so it was taking the full tax share, then that would also mean that the urban renewal district would not be collecting the share that they would have. So the urban renewal district is one of the taxing entities that counts towards this 51% of signing on or not signing on.
So we're doing exemptions, and something not gonna have any taxes at all. That's just a comment.
okay. So do you have more that you want to get through before because when we start talking about the benefits, we're gonna get going here pretty quick.
Well, I was gonna say if the council would prefer to just like discuss each benefit in turn rather than me going through all of them, we could do it that way as well.
Maybe we can do this. Does anybody have questions about what some of these benefits are? Like something that's you guys want to bring up and just be like, can we get more information about it before we start discussing what should be on there on the list and what shouldn't be on the list?
My questions are more around moving maybe some of these to list B and making higher priorities in list A or different priorities in list A.
Okay, so I think maybe take us down the list and then we can kind of give a like, hey, we're good with that. Go ahead, Victoria.
Well, and I also think when we're talking about flexibility, I think it's nice that you're coming up with these ideas. But I think that it's important to allow the developers to come up with ideas and bring it to us because they know what they need in with their community of people that they're trying to gear towards, right? And it's similar to like stormwater, you know, if we have a stormwater management manual that has specific ways that you can meet the criteria, but people come in and go, hey, I've got this really cool idea for a rain garden that does this, that, and the other, and we're able to approve that. I think that we need to be open to those ideas if we're going to move forward with this. I also think that the amount of benefits that they get should be dependent on the years, because I think 10 is a lot, so we'll get into that later, but anyway.
Just a couple of quick responses to that. In terms of like getting input from developers. My hope in tonight is getting some initial feedback from the council of like, where do you want to take this to be able to then go have conversations with developers of what does this seem
Right,
right?
but you're trying to
with?
put a list together, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying maybe the list needs to be open. And when you have that dim, which by the way, I think the fee of that should be refundable to them once they submit plans, but irregardless, that's a sidebar. But I think that they should be allowed to say, you have to come up with some benefits. What are you planning on doing? And then see that in their plans, not necessarily spoon feeding them what we have to have and see what kind of ideas that they come up with, because I think the community can come up with ideas sometimes better than we can.
Okay, so one quick comment about the dim. Can we find a different, something else to call it? Right, so we don't get confused with the other dim that we're requiring developers to go through.
Yeah.
I know acronyms are really tough. Something like,
We need more.
Project consultation is what it should be called.
so, and then I think that, like, I actually think Victoria's got a really interesting idea, which is some sort of language that allows them to propose something, and then how do we actually talk about it and whether or not it meets, meets a public good, right? We don't have to have the whole complete list tonight.
Yeah.
That's what that other was for, right?
Yeah, so in the draft program guidelines, I'm not sure exactly what page it's on, there is kind of that flexibility in there of if you want to propose something else. Detailing what that is there policy support for that? And then allowing the city to consider that too.
Yeah, it just seemed like that was sort of like lower down on the list, and I think that the idea of allowing the developers to come up with those should be more of a higher. It's just me.
I mean, I think you're saying we need some flexibility built in, and I agree, because throughout the time period of, however long this program lasts, things are gonna change through that cycle of time, and we're gonna wanna add or change or alter. So if we just build in flexibility up front, that makes it, I think, easier on the whole process.
Joe?
So this whole thing is being driven by the HDTE, is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand. the question.
HDTE.
Yes, that's what we're calling the tax exemption. I guess I'm just trying to understand.
So I'm just trying to get a grasp of what's driving this. So the driver for us thinking about doing this is, can you tell me what that is?
For thinking about the public benefits or for the like
It's
the
an
tax
ORS.
exemption?
Yeah, well, there's a state statute that says that we're supposed to be doing this, correct?
So this is a discretionary program the city could adopt or could choose not to adopt. The reason that the council is talking about this is back when the housing strategy was put together. One of the things that the council directed staff to look into was property tax exemptions, and this was one specific tax exemption that the council had wanted to explore.
Right, so I guess what I'm getting at is that we're not compelled to do this. There's nothing that's telling us we must do it this way.
The state statute says that we need that for a property tax exemption to be granted, there needs to be at least one public benefit. So if we were to adopt this property tax exemption, the public benefit piece is required, but what that looks like
Right.
is open.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is it's the public benefit part is been left up to our imagination. And so, the list is kind of just a jump off point, because, for example, I'm looking at the park in structures. I don't know of a single developer that would want to do that because it's extremely expensive. But yet we have that on the list as both tier 1 or tier type A, or whatever you call it, list A and list B. So things like that, I'm looking at that and say, why would a developer even want some of these things? And I like what Victoria Doyle's saying, is like, well, why don't we say, okay, we're going to have this program. You come to us with your imagination and you tell us what you think the public benefit would be. And then we could decide at that point if it's a public development. As opposed to us saying, well, we got these great ideas, but I don't see a single developer at this table. And I know you talked with Rick, no, not Satry, but
Bill Barrington.
Bill. And so they have their own interests for sure. But again, I think that we're almost kind of getting the dog before the horse, or the horse before the cart, in a sense that we should be going to and having this program set up and say, okay, we want to do this, you want to develop, great. Here's some, there's properties you want to look at, you want to buy, so you tell us, we got to satisfy a public benefit. These are what we're have looked at. And what do you want to do? And then have us or someone up the chain of command, whatever the command chain looks like at the day, and say, yeah, that's a good public benefit. I think we can move forward with that. Because some of these would break the developer. They would say, I'm out.
Victoria?
So I like the idea of having your categories. So a couple slides back where you had different categories, and then that would be what the developer would say, we have an idea and it falls under this category. And then the city is able to look at it and go, is that really a benefit? How much of a benefit is it? And is it worth that? And then at that point, I agree. I think we're trying to come up with these ideas that we think would be great. But I think that we're not the experts on that per se, when it comes to the development and the cost that it's gonna be to them. So that would be where I would think would be a good way to do it, is that higher level idea, and then let them decide. And then we decide if it's cool.
Cool.
I think I'm looking at this a bit differently. It's probably not a surprise, but I think that what's helpful, I think it's a philosophical difference. Like, do we want the developers to decide what works for Springfield and what Springfield looks like? Or do we want to think about what is overall, what are we working towards? And I think if some of these things come up to us in other ways, how do we improve bike and pedestrian infrastructure? How are we going to improve the livability and walkability of communities? Are we going to put that out there as like, this is what we're trying to achieve? Because if it doesn't happen in some of these developments, it's going to come back and we're going to pay for it out of other ways in the city to make that happen. But if we're like, no, this is overall what we would like to achieve, and here are these ways that we can contribute to it, or we're going to end up with little pockets of things that don't necessarily, fit together as we work to like improve the infrastructure and the livability of the city. So that's why I'm looking at it a little bit differently, because I was like, yes, we're inviting them to share and to say, we have these additional ideas that we would like. And we're like, okay, and these are the sort of the values and the plans that we have decided as a city that we are working towards in terms of the livability of our neighborhoods, particularly in those pockets that are on the map. See, I think that's the other thing, is like it all fits together. So you're looking at these sort of nodal areas or whatever we used to call them. I'm looking particularly at Mohawk and thinking about part of this is that, you're developing maybe commercial land into housing, and what is it that's needed in those areas, as opposed to come tell us what you think should now be plopped down in the middle of this neighborhood. So I think it's kind of a both and. Sure, I think we're open to hearing other things, and these other things that we all talked about here a few weeks ago, about these things would be the things that would be the values that we would want to see. So I'm seeing it a little bit differently.
Victoria?
I think I agree. And I feel like we're saying the same thing, in that when I was talking about those categories, they should be the categories that are the priorities to the city. And if pedestrian, walking, and transit, and that is a priority, then that would be one that would be in that tier one, that would be like, this is the one that's going to get you the most benefit, or what have you. And so we set out to say, these are the things we want to see. Now you come with your ideas. That's all I was saying.
Yeah,
Establish our priorities.
Yeah, establish our priorities and then let them.
Yeah, almost hearing like a policy framework and say, hey, you gotta fit into, like, you gotta fit something into, something on this list, whether or not be bike ped, lighting, whatever case, whatever case may be. And some of these, I think when I read through them, like, I was questioning whether or not, like, what developments would actually, meet that public benefit, and that somebody would actually want to spend the actual money to complete, right? Like, I think the question about the parking structure is a good example of that. Or I think there's a term that they use for, transit, like a substantial, impact to transit, right? Like, so I think just probably a sizing of this would probably be a good piece. But if we can get it into some big frameworks that say, hey, you need to find something for, I don't know, housing variability, like I liked the point, the call out about different sizes and, of apartment complexes. I think that's good, but, public space, right? Like there's a good list here, but I don't know that it needs to be so prescriptive to define how we meet it. Anybody else?
So, question to clarify just for direction. So I'm hearing from Counselor Doyle, this interest in having sort of these broader categories, but maybe just sort of slashing through these detail pieces. And so I'm wondering if that is council direction, one, and then two, if that is the case, is the council still interested in this like list A, list B concept, or would it be more broad than that?
No.
I'd say give them a laundry list and say pick three, you know, instead of, you know, because that's true, where they're gonna take a look at this other list and make, and some on list B may be more attractive than doing stuff on A. So you can potentially, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do a matrix on it. You can put each one of those, assign points to it and say, if you, as soon as you get to 100 points, we're good. You know, there's different ways to look at things as opposed to the linear A, B. You can weight these. If some are most impactful, something that are very impactful for the area, but expensive, then give them more weight and allow them to check off one, so to speak, instead of having to have three of the things, because you have one on A and two on. If you have where there's a point value to them, as soon as they get to a certain point value, then okay. That's, I mean, I would look at it differently.
Michelle?
Just to kind of, so we're having this upfront conversation. So I feel like a lot of this is gonna be handled, you know, however we do this list, a lot of that planning and all of that. Does this make sense? Does this fit into what the city's goals are today? All of that kind of plays in there. So I agree. I think a longer list is good. And at that time, we're having that conversation that either makes sense in that moment or it doesn't. And we say, well, yes, we can do this piece, but how about instead we look at, you know what I mean? There's a conversation there between us and the developer then. And if I understand this right, council is approving all of these applications at some point, is that right?
Yes.
So we all have we all have an opportunity with each application to look at what's that final product gonna be in that time frame, right? In that period of time that application is presented.
Victoria?
No, it's okay. I'm fine.
Another thing that I think would be helpful, right, and you saw us trip over it kind of coming into the start of the list, is maybe at, you know, I'm looking at the matrix, it might be in the program guidelines, but is there language that says, hey, if you're an affordable housing project, this might not be the right program for you, like maybe look at LUPD?
There's not, but I could add that.
Like when I read the first two, I had the question like, okay, could we, you know, we have so many housing programs now, could we end up with somebody that should be that's in this track that we really want in a different track?
But I do have to say, I agree with Councilor Rodley in that I like the idea of having that mixed use, that idea of having market rate as well as having, you know, affordable housing in the same complex. I think that's something that's really important. So I don't know how that fits into what we're doing. I liked the idea.
I mean, if it's a priority, then I think we should kind of set
Yeah.
some parameters around what we're looking for, but just not be so rigid that it has to have that. Like, I think it's a thought, right? This is what we want to do. And see, you know, the developers are going to come either with something in that realm or something completely different. But again, I think those are those upfront conversations that we're having.
We're gonna go Joe and then Corey.
So actually, if you look on the tapping tree, page 5, you'll see where it allows for the proposal to submit a benefit, and staff will decide whether it's worth it or not. So there is that in their draft.
I just would hate to see somebody come in with some big round plan that doesn't fit at all. So I think just giving them some of what our priorities are. Sorry, Craig.
That's okay.
Jump in front of you.
When we build it, since as we're talking about this and we're building this and we're who we are as a group, can we like build in a year or 2 years to come back and like look at if it's being used? We kind of did this with the RV camping. We're like, okay, come back and let's see who's using it. How do we need to make adjustments? Should we be adding, decreasing, whatever? Is there a way to build that into this as opposed to like it's printed, it's gone live and we're done?
So there is in the draft program guidelines, something that says that staff will report annually to council on applications and exemptions. So that would be one way. I'm not sure. if
Yeah,
the
I
council-
saw that in there, but I was just like, we haven't built, like, can we then redo the program or can we? Or once is it like, is there some sort of, here's my messy way of saying, is it, if we design this program to meet the statute or requirement, is it stuck in that place for a certain period of time? Or can we adjust it?
There's nothing stuck in place. The sort of administrative hurdles of it is, I believe that the program guidelines can be adopted by resolution, so that's fairly easy to update. But we would need to adopt this into code. And then in my conversations with city attorney's office about if we made changes to it, would we need to go back to other taxing districts? And I think the answer to that is yes. So it would be sort of revisiting that. So it is not impossible. It's not set in stone. It would just take some administrative steps to do that.
But that's helpful, because then it makes sense for us to iron out as much as we can on the front end to minimize what would happen if we had to go to everybody in a year and a half or whatever.
Or at least maybe think about the areas where there's flexibility to put stuff in just the program guidelines that might be easier to change.
And I think that's an kind of an open question for, as we go and talk to our partners and friends out there in this, like, is there a way we could have that conversation that would allow us to make, I don't know, marginal tweaks to the program without having to come back every 5 minutes and ask them for permission? If there's a way that we can adopt more findings, build process into the guidelines that would, alleviate some of that, I would be interested, interested in that. Maybe we have to go back and tell them what we do, or we can only tweak it a certain amount. But that's awful, but that sounds very rigid to changing what we do in the future. Victoria?
Do you have more of your presentation? Because I have something to comment on that isn't about the benefits, and I just want to make sure I'm not throwing that in the wrong time or the wrong place.
Yeah, so I was gonna get into other aspects of the program guidelines.
I will wait then,
Give you feedback on
because
that.
what I have may come up. You
Okay.
may answer the question before I ask it.
If you have other places you want to go, then we should probably do that before we keep, hammering away at this.
So I'm wondering if the council wants to finish going through all the other things and come back to these, because I think I'm still sort of looking for direction on how we want to handle the public benefit piece of it. If we do want to list anything, but with less specificity, what those things would be. So do you want to go through the rest of it and then come back to this? or-
Okay, so maybe we can try wrapping up sort of direction on this, because this is gonna take a couple, it's gonna take a couple iterations to get forward. So what I heard was turn it into some sort of policy list and let people choose from a single list and sort of mix and match and then provide them. I don't know, is everybody good with the weighting?
You have like the benefits and then the examples of the different benefits, like you have the benefit list on the left and then provide some examples of those benefits.
Something more like maybe
And
met
then
by
other,
this, or
so
something
that
like.
they have some guidance on what we're looking for.
Yep.
Maybe.
And I've also heard, trying to weight that list in some way so you can kind of understand the magnitude. So that, maybe one big thing gets you to the finish line, but 3 small things get you to the finish line. Now, did anybody see something outside of the parking garage? Did anybody see something on that actual benefit list that they were like, no, I don't like, I'm not interested in that, pull it off?
No, but I did like the ones at the bottom. There were like some other ones, some of those were really innovative. And so I was like, I kind of liked those, that were like, the advancing public infrastructure and the energy efficiency, all of those. Like, I was like, those are cool. So maybe when you're making the one big list, to just elevate those, because those are great.
As usual, I added that there should be the option of having an on-site dog park, but I'm just saying. Like they. For people to have their.
That's community space.
Yeah, or tenant amenities, that would maybe fall into that.
The other list too. I thought it was really good. Anybody have something else that they want to either strike or add to that longer list?
It doesn't state, you said provide EV charging stations, and I don't see how many you're saying.
So
Per unit?
some of these had not, we hadn't fleshed out specificities, waiting to see if council wanted to move forward with them. And I think that's where staff's just gonna have to think more about this, like, if we want it to be more flexible and say, you know, such as EV charging stations, how on like a case by case basis, we would handle that question.
I get that, but let's say we have a large development downtown. And has anybody considered how much energy it would cost to charge those charging stations, and if there's a capacity for that?
So I think in terms of what we had discussed with the EV charging was that the number of stations, it wouldn't be like one per unit, it would be like one per X number.
Right, but what I'm saying is that I'm talking about the availability of the electrical charge
To do that.
to charge those stations. So if we have them downtown, I think that's going to be very close to impossible. As opposed to out Main Street or different parts of the city. So I think before we even start thinking about putting a number of, for example, the high energy use items, a conversation with sub would be in order.
You're talking about capacity of the system, aren't you?
That's correct.
So some of these are partner conversations, right? Partner agency conversations as to whether there will be a viable benefit or not.
So I don't want to be down to making decisions. Hey, I want an EV station for every unit built. We're going to build 120 of them downtown. Oops. Can't do it.
And I would say that EV one, we've got to probably cap it at their state requirement for the conduit,
Yes.
right? Like, you know, because I think it's like 40% of, you know, all parking spots or something like that. Okay. Did that give you enough direction?
So I'm hearing strike structured parking, add all these other ones below. Were there any others that were not encompassed on this list that the council?
I'm not saying strike it, but what I'm saying is that it would be a rainbow thing, leprechaun thing, if you find a developer that will do it.
There's lots of, they're doing that in Eugene on many of the developments, 959 Franklin, they have underground parking. They're starting to build those developments with underground parking.
I
It's
think
becoming a thing.
They're required, right?
I don't know, oh, because it's a requirement.
There you go.
Well, they find the money for it, so.
Okay, so maybe some more information when we have the second conversation about that, because I think that may be the important context. Okay. We got about 10 minutes left before we, you know, have passed the red line and we got to start migrating our way to the other room.
Well, let's get back to, so in addition to this public benefit requirement, the council would need to set other minimum eligibility requirements for the program. And so there's a copy of draft program guidelines in your packet as attachment 3. If the city adopts this property tax exemption, there are certain things by statute that we would need to do. I've tried to highlight those in gray in the packet, but there are a lot of policy decisions too, and those are highlighted in blue. And these guidelines are written with staff's recommendations for those policy decisions. And I'm just going to kind of run through those and then get some direction on that. So first, the city needs to determine what the minimum number of units a project has to include in order to qualify for this program. Staff is requiring that developers meet the development code definition of multiple unit housing, which is 5 or more dwelling units on an individual lot or parcel, except for cottage cluster housing and not counting ADUs. So that's kind of getting at the higher density development that we're looking at in these mixed use and higher density residential areas. Second is the length of exemptions that the city would grant. So by statute, unless we're sort of offering this special affordable housing provision, which staff isn't recommending because we do have that LRFD program in place, the maximum exemption length is 10 years. So in some past council meetings, there had been several council members that had expressed interest in limiting the length of the exemption to 5 years. Staff is recommending that council offer exemptions for the full 10 years for qualifying projects. So of the other city programs that we looked at, there were 8 other cities that we looked at. Only the city of Salem had granted an exemption for fewer than 10 years, and that was for a duplex. And then I think also kind of the market context right now with high interest rates, high construction costs, and some more bank loan hesitancy given the recent bank failures. That is making it hard for projects to pencil. And then there is also a certain administrative burden to applying for and complying with this program that may not be worth it to some developers for sort of a short exemption period. The council does have several options here. First, you could uniformly decide to grant exemptions of 10 or fewer years. You could also decide to grant exemptions of different numbers of years for different projects, but in that case, the council would need to set kind of what standards we're determining, you know, when a project qualified for 5 years versus 8 or whatever the council chose to do. And then there's sort of a third option that the council could require that projects make a showing that they could not pencil but for this tax exemption. And cities that have this requirement usually have developers submit 2 pro formas, one with the tax exemption applied and one without it applied to show that they financially need it. And this would be kind of a different way of limiting the fiscal impact of the program while still ensuring that projects that were granted it got sort of the maximum benefit out of it. So 3 options there. And then other recommendations, so staff is recommending that new construction, additions, and conversions from non-residential uses be eligible to apply for this. So these are all infill areas of Springfield where there's not a lot of vacant developable land that's ripe for residential, so making sure it's open. And then staff's also recommending that we require developers to comply with the code as it's adopted. So this is in here because there's a lot of focus at the state level right now on increasing housing production. And so what's come with that are some bills that are further limiting what the city can do in terms of regulating land use, especially for housing development. So this would just be requiring developers to follow the code where they otherwise might use a statutory exemption. And then finally, we talked about this a little bit before, but attend something like a development initiation meeting to talk through mostly the public benefit aspect before applying. And so the question here just being, does council have feedback on any of those points or the guidelines more generally?
Corey?
I like the 10 years. I mean, I think that's reasonable and fine. And also, you know, it is different from the affordable housing. So I'm like, I feel fine about that. And I do really like the idea that people come to a meeting and establish the relationship before they get going too far on it. So I support all of that.
Victoria?
Okay. I have some suggestions, ideas. So the DIM, it's like a project consultation and it has a significant cost associated with it, correct? I believe that if you're going to require that DIM, then once plans are submitted for a project that's been approved for this, then that DIM cost should be refunded to them. That's what I think. And then I think that the 10 years should be reserved for those but-fors. Because to me, I'm looking at this program and I'm saying, who is this benefiting? The tax exemption, because the developers that I've worked with, it's those upfront costs that are killing them. It's having those permit fees, it's the SDC fees, it's all of those fees that go into actually breaking ground before they ever even get their shovel in the ground. And so it seems like, and I could be totally wrong, but it seems like that this benefits those much larger developers who are, you know, I want to say the OBs and that kind of thing that do these awesome projects, but that can use that where there's a lot of developers are building small subdivisions that would benefit more from upfront help than this long term. So I would be more interested in like a 5-year up to 10 years with that but-for built in there, even if it's got something to do with the cost of the project or the size of the project or the number of units or something that ties it to that 5 to 10 year amount. I don't think it should just be a blanket 10 years. Yep, that's it on the list.
Okay, anybody else? I think those guidelines look fine. I mean, I think, running through that through a 5 to 10 year window is good. I'm really interested in this question of who does this help, right? Because I acknowledge, right, developments are all shapes and sizes, right? Like as far as size and scale and capital. So if we check off an assistance program that covers, sort of big developments, then I kind of have the question about how do we promote the smaller stuff too? But I think that's maybe a separate sort of policy conversation. Does anybody have other opinions about adding the but-for? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, on that, Victoria brought up the SDCs and whatnot, and we're sitting at this table. We're sitting at this old table coming up on decades. And what still is the problem is that if the city waived 100% of our SDCs, that still isn't going to be a big dent in what they have to pay up front for SDCs because of Lamb Lane and because of some our partners that these costs, especially multi-unit, you look at the multi-unit, I'm not going to try to throw a number out there, but a multi-unit facility where you have like say 8 or 10 units, you realize how much Lima Lane charges for each one of those units. There's those units, these projects that are really aren't that huge, are into 6 figures. And so we can talk about it all we want, but as long as it's, Eugene's different because they have their parks department is the same as Eugene. They don't have these separate agencies. So until, we can do all we can, we can break the bank for city of Springfield while other agencies next to us are bringing in their cash and having their cash flow and getting along just fine. But I don't see the point in us slashing our own wrists to get somewhere and getting housings being built when everybody else is going to benefit from the tax base from that structures. And here we are sitting by ourselves, and we're the ones that are shooting ourselves this whole time, spending hours and hours coming up with things on how we can get some things built. It boils down to exactly what Victoria's doing. It's SDC, and you're just here by proxy. I get it. So, but it's that's the bigger picture. So until we get other people on board, that's when I think we can have some real conversations and make some big headway. But until then, we can have this out here and that we won't get after on projects in the next 10 years.
One of the things I think we need to do before we wrap up is the next team Springfield meeting, like our position as an agent, as an agency really needs to be that the topic that we talking to needs to be the SDCs and development fees, right? That's the place that we've got everybody at the table and can kind of dive into something from, with some meat on it, instead of having the staffs kind of have to go back and forth between all of them.
Go ahead. And to give you an example of how deep their heels are dug in is that we can't even get them to waive for ADUs, which is an 800 square foot little structure. We can't get them to partner up with them. So good luck.
So the team Springfield thing's not a thing for you. It's
please don't get me wrong. You're there just like proxy, and you did a great job tonight.
And thank you all.
Thank you.
We're going to take a couple of conversations to get this.
Sure.
So are you making those notes and then coming back to us? Or are we talking to partner agencies first and then coming back?
I had originally been thinking, start informally talking to partner agencies to let them know that we would be coming back formally over the summer. If that is fine with the council, I would continue with that and then come back to you in the fall.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
We are adjourned. Still with 1 minute. I'm going to call the city council regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Counselor Weber. Here.
Counselor Mo.
Here.
Counselor Rodley.
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
And Counselor Pictionary.
Here, thank you.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin our meeting tonight, there are two designated times for public testimony under public hearings and business from the audience. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of the council chambers and give them to the city recorder. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak to either of those times, please join us by using the raised hand feature in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone in person in the council chambers, and then anyone who has raised their virtual hand. First item, please.
Mayor, you have two items under Springfield Upbeat tonight. The first item is Mayor's recognition. May is Bike Month proclamation.
Whereas the bicycle is an economical, healthy, and convenient form of transportation and an excellent tool for the enjoyment of Springfield's scenic beauty. And whereas through the month of May, residents may experience the joy of biking and support our local economy by biking to a nearby shop or dining establishment. Whereas the bicycle industry's sales and bicycle tourism could contribute to at least $440 million for Oregon's economy and generate 7,000 jobs. And whereas with money saved from lower travel costs, people who ride bikes have more money to spend with local businesses and can grow our economy. Whereas the city of Springfield and Safe Routes to School are promoting greater public awareness of the bicycle operation and its safety in an effort to improve the health and safety for everyone on our streets. I, Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of the City of Springfield, proclaim May 2023 as Bicycle Month in Springfield and challenge Springfield residents to get out and enjoy our regional pass or visit a local business by biking this month. Our own piece. I don't know what to do with it if they send it back. And Michael, I think you set the bar for the public works people who are going to come later this month to celebrate their week. So like the challenge has apparently been thrown down.
That's my week. My week.
Next item, please.
Next item is item 2 under Springfield Upbeat, and that's the Earth Day Art Competition item, and that's Thomas Gray for the staff report.
Well, good evening, Council. We are here to recognize the winners of the Environmental Services Division annual Earth Day Art Competition. We've been doing this competition for many years now with the Springfield Public School District, specifically with the 4th grade classes. We had about 150 submissions this year. We put out a poster contest that is themed around environmental sustainability and environmental education for kids leading up to Earth Day, which this year was April 22nd. And we got about 150 submissions back. Staff voted for the top 20 submissions. We have 15 of our honorable mentions out in the lobby tonight, and we have one of our honorable mentions here in person. And then we have the top 5 winners who were submitted to Mayor Van Gordon, and he personally ranked 1st through 5th place. And we're going to go ahead and present the awards for 1st to 5th. So in 5th place, we have Larissa Landa.
Want to hold your art, you put it in a frame for you. Great. There's one. I'm gonna take one more. Wonderful. Congratulations.
In fourth place, we have Abigail Fields.
Gorgeous, thank you.
In third place, we have Kimberly. And we were unable to confirm a last name. I don't think she's here tonight. In second place, we have Millie Lease. And it looks like I think she's also not here tonight. Okay, we do have our first place winner, and that is Adeline New. Once again. Photo. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is the consent calendar.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Neil, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
It's been a long time since I've been able to say this. Motion passes. 6 yeses, 0 no's. All right, and I know we had a lot of families that joined us. We've got a long agenda item, set of agendas items. So please, if you want to join us and participate, by all means, you're welcome, but don't feel the need to stay for the entire evening. Next item, please.
Next item, you have 5 items under business from the city manager. Item number 1 is the fiscal year 2024 Community Development Block Grant CDBG Annual Action Plan. Aaron Fifield is here for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight with the fiscal year 2024 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Each year, the city of Springfield receives an entitlement allocation of community development block grant funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. These funds may primarily be used to address housing and community development needs of low-income persons in Springfield. In order to receive these funds, the city must create an annual action plan to describe specific actions to be undertaken. In fiscal year 2024, we anticipate having $622,374 in new funds available for projects. Tonight's action plan reflects the direction from City Council given during the April 10th work session. This includes funding allocations toward the city's home repair program to rehabilitate existing housing owned by low-income persons. It includes an allocation toward the city's home ownership program, helping to provide down payment assistance to low-income homeowners. It supports Lane County's human services delivery system to support low-income and unhoused persons, and it includes an allocation towards staff administration of the grant. This plan follows a public involvement process that included 2 public hearings by the Community Development Advisory Committee and a 30-day public comment period on the draft.
Are there any questions? All right, I think we're ready for a motion.
Trying to find it, stand by. We need more. I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and authorize the city manager to execute all documents needed to give effect to the city's agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for these funds.
Second.
All right, Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 no's. Next item, please.
Next item is the Cornerstone Community Housing Funding Request, and Aaron Fifield is here for this report as well.
Hello again. I'm here tonight with a request for funding from Cornerstone Community Housing. Included in tonight's packet is a memo from Cornerstone It describes their new affordable housing development in Springfield that is experiencing a gap in funding. As you may recall, this is a 39-unit development near 16th and Q Street with a mix of apartment sizes, serving low-income seniors, providing resident services and a community room. This is a $12 million development. In the fall of 2022, Cornerstone applied for $2 million in federal home funds. This request for home funds came before council on February 6, 2023, to which council gave their approval for that project. Part of that pro forma at the time included a $640,000 CDBG award that through a back and forth discussion, we decided was ultimately not compatible with the project. So they have a gap. Timing wise, the plan is to apply for close to $7 million from Oregon Housing and Community Services this summer for their biannual every 2 years notice of funding availability. Cornerstone is requesting additional support from the city to fill this gap with local resources that will allow them to be more competitive for state funding. So normally the question is there funding available? And usually I would turn to CDBG to ask that question. We've determined it's incompatible. We actually do have, the city actually does have funding that would fit this. And so that is what I'm bringing here tonight is for your consideration. If you recall, in 2021, the city received an unsolicited $1 million from the state general fund as part of Senate Bill 5561 to address housing insecurity, to address the lack of affordable housing, or to address homelessness. We met with council in 2 work sessions on February 14th and April 18th, 2022. And council discussed a long list of projects that they would be interested in funding. At the time, council noted that they did not want to fund projects that would need ongoing funding. And so ultimately council awarded that $1 million to 3 different projects. 1, home ownership development through Habitat for Humanity's Fisher Village project. A homelessness response and street outreach by giving funds to the police department to procure a second van for Cahoots. And 3rd, to support the Egan Warming Center by installing a fire suppression system at Everett Methodist Church in exchange for a commitment for a 10-year agreement to host as a warming center. The Habitat project and Cahoots van are both moving forward. However, with the 3rd award, Everett ultimately had to decline. I've since talked with staff at Lane County about a long-term Egan warming site. They've advised that they do not have long-term funding to support operational costs to run a shelter. For instance, if we were to take that $600,000 and buy a building, could Lane County support funding that operationally? And they said no. And their advice was that partnering with a religious community to use their space in winter is still the best arrangement to serve the Egan Warming Center needs. Staff at the county have offered to help with outreach to the religious community here in Springfield so that we can find a site in the future. All that said, we have an estimated $565,000 remaining in this award from state general funds that could be reallocated. And at the same time, Cornerstone has come in with this request to help fill their gap for an affordable housing project that would be eligible for these funds. So the question to council is, would you like to reallocate the remainder of the state general funds toward the Cornerstone Community Housing Project?
Corey.
Thank you. 2 things. One, I remember when we were talking about this allocations in the first time around, and this was one of our questions was if somehow it doesn't get spent, will it come back and can we put it to something else? So I appreciate one that we had that conversation and that this is what's happening. And I am very much in support of this. I think that y'all have heard me say it before. I think this particular development on Q Street is fantastic. It fits some needs that we are not seeing in other ways, which is for seniors and ADA accommodations. It's very hard for folks who need ADA accommodations or wheelchair users to find affordable rental housing. So I am absolutely supportive of doing this.
Anybody else? All right, the one question I had, is there any news from the utility board on what they're interested in their piece of property that is adjacent to this?
Uh,
It's complicated. I got it.
yeah, short answer is no.
Okay, and that,
No news.
okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
So you had 565 left over, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's so council awarded 300,000 to Habitat. That's not changing. It's the number from Cahoots. They've got an estimate to upgrade their van. And then council also wanted to make sure there were funds to sort of pay for staff time to administer this grant. And so that's where the estimate, maybe 575, maybe 565, but that's the ballpark.
So high fives.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yep.
And then the gap for Cornerstone is exactly how much?
They said it's about 600,000 in the memo.
So they're still gonna be shy, or is that an approximate or estimate on their behalf, or do they have hard numbers?
I think everything probably with the rate environment right now is a little flexible. I will say, Michelle Martin is here. She's the chief financial officer for Cornerstone. I think she's new to the organization, but has been involved in the project.
Hey, Michelle.
Yep.
Come on.
Good evening. She was right that with the rate environment, what it is, we have estimates and very good projections, but it can fluctuate a few $100,000 with what we have right now. And what we are seeing for our scoring, and we're getting in for letters of support from the banking institutions, we're going to be much tighter than that, closer to that $600,000 gap. And we're prepared to find sources to fund that.
All right. Go ahead, Joe.
And so the question is, so the 565, 575 is good to potentially be slightly shy of what you need, but get you very, very close.
Tremendously helpful, yes, and it will get us there. Yeah.
And so your confidence level is at 100%.
Ooh.
Gotta ask.
Yeah, I feel very confident about the project. 100% is always tough on development projects, but the project is ready to go. We have an incredible team. Everybody is very, very excited and has been very supportive. And I think that in the high 90s.
So, but I mean, I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Kind of squirreling around on it is that, do you have a plan B so that way you can say, okay, we get this, we can do this, and we'll get there. As opposed to, okay, if we get this and we hope we get there, and then if you don't get there, then you show back up here. So that's what I do.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Thank you for explaining. With the amount of such a small gap to fill, I'm confident that we can fill that without coming back and asking.
Okay. And that's recorded, so I support it.
Okay.
Victoria.
I just want to say I've worked with Cornerstone Community and some of the projects you've done in Eugene, and I'm fully supportive of this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fun, wasn't it? All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve allocation of the state general funds for Cornerstone Community Housing Springfield Apartment.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos.
And I'd like to make a second motion, please. Authorize the city manager, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute all documents needed to give effect to the city's agreement with the Cornerstone Community Housing for these funds.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Aye.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please. Thank you.
Next item is item number 3, ratification of the MWMC fiscal year 2023-2024 regional wastewater program budget and capital improvements program, the CIP. Matt Stouter is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have somewhat of an abbreviated presentation for you tonight. You may have watched our department budget presentations, so there's a lot of information in there, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. As you may know, the MWMC IGA allows for the governing bodies of Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County to ratify our regional budget and CIP. On the 14th of April, the MWMC approved that regional budget and CIP and directed staff to forward it out to the governing bodies. The commission held 3 work sessions over the period of January, February, and March, and then culminating in the April meeting. And they adopted a 4.5% rate adjustment in that budget. In accordance with our IGA, Eugene provides for the operations and maintenance of our regional facilities, and Springfield does the administrative services, which includes the planning, the capital construction, the financing of projects, and the budget and the permit administration, among other things. This budget provides for the MWMC to operate and maintain our existing facilities and infrastructure, provide service to the approximately 250,000 community members that reside in our area, implement the commission's key outcomes that drive our work, fund our capital improvement program, cover our debt service obligations, and respond to regulatory and permit requirements, including the recently reissued permit that we got on November 1st of this past year. So the approved 23-24 budget includes $23.9 million for our operating budget. That's a 7.1% increase over last year. I would note that there's a 2.37 FTE change that's on the Eugene side, that they've held staffing relatively flat over the last several years. It includes an electrician, safety manager, and a lab specialist. It's broken out amongst those positions. We have a 6.9% increase on M&S, and that includes our indirects, chemicals, utilities, those types of things. And then the overall budget combined is a 7% increase in personnel services, including regular wages, Medicare, health insurance, PERS, those types of numbers, So the SDC, our SDC revenues are on target. We have seen economic growth in the region, particularly around the U of O, and our revenues are on track. The capital budget for this year is set at $67.1 million, and that spans multiple years because our projects are large and they do cover multiple years. So that money will track forward. The majority of our projects are plant performance improvement projects, including replacement of our electrical switchgear. We have a thermal load mitigation project in partnership with the Pure Water Partners. That's in response to our environmental permitting. We have a administration building improvements that we're working on. And then there's quite a bit of work associated with equipment replacement and major rehab as our plant is starting to age. It's approaching, it's over 40 years old. Our 5-year CIP is projected at $129 million. And so, as I mentioned earlier, our budget must be approved by Lane County, Springfield, and Eugene prior to adoption. And that occurs on July 1. That the budget will go into effect on July 1. We're here before you tonight. We're going to be before Eugene Council on May 8th, and then at the county board on May 9th for ratification before finally going back to the commission for final adoption on June 9th. And so with that, I request that you consider ratifying the budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions? All right.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ratifying the fiscal year 23-24 regional wastewater program budget and capital improvement program if resolution number 2 is adopted in tonight's public hearing.
Second.
Weird.
What's that if?
I think we have the rate increases later, so
Oh,
it's in a funky order.
Is that the cart before the horse?
Normally this item comes after. It's on the schedule ahead of time tonight.
All right, well,
We do that, Mayor B.
well,
Okay, then that's my motion and it stands.
all right, thank you. Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is a resolution of necessity for South 28th Street paving project P 21155. This is resolution number 4, a resolution exercising the power of eminent domain and authorizing a resolution pursuant to ORS 223.005, ORS 223.105, and ORS 35.600 through 625 concerning acquisition of right-of-way necessary for the 28th Street paving project, again, P 21155. And Christy Kruger is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back in February, Council approved this resolution of necessity for the South 28th project. Since then, we received the legal descriptions for every single property. And so our new city surveyor highly suggested that we come back to ask Council to reapprove this resolution of necessities, which shows exactly what right of way we would like to acquire, as well as the temporary construction easements.
Are there any questions?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 4.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is Spark at Booth Kelly lease amendment. Ally Camp is here for this item.
Good evening, everyone. I am here today to talk to you about the lease amendment we have for Spark at Suite 150 in Booth Kelly. The lease amendment in your packet includes an addition of outdoor space and a work letter to address improvements to the building's roof. For background knowledge, the existing lease was implemented or approved by council and implemented in November of 2022. That is for Connected Lake County for Booth Kelly Suite 150. The lease identifies 3 years of payment. The first year is a nominal payment of $1. The second year is $2,395 a month, and the third year is for $2,875 a month. They needed substantial tenant improvements to the space to make it into the area that they need. Thus, the 3-year lease was approved by council. I'm going to explain a couple of the items within the amendment, and we're going to start with the outdoor space. The additional outdoor space measures approximately 3,000 square feet, and you can see that in your attachment 3. There's no added cost for the space proposed in the draft lease in front of you. That draft lease amendment is attachment 4. There's a precedent for leasing outdoor space for tenants at Kelly. The fitness facility leases outdoor space. The fitness facility is right next door to Spark. They use the loading dock in the back when it's warm out to let the athletes have some air. The extra space would give Spark the ability to have a safe space for students outside the building. This space is not currently being leased or used by any other tenants. The nearest tenant is the gym, and we confirmed with them, and their access would remain unimpeded. For tenants that may want to use shared space at Booth Kelly, they can request the use of the crane shed, which is the covered structure there. We have a process where folks can use that space for things like barbecues, and the tenants, we've been told, work well with each other whenever those accommodations need to happen. Onto the roof item. The lease amendment addresses the alteration to the roof. There's a work letter included as an attachment to the lease amendment that identifies the terms and conditions to deliver that alteration. The roof was installed as part of the tenant improvements carried out by the architects, engineers, and work crew hired by Connected Lake County for Spark. This will be paid for by the city as its role of landlord/property owner. The roof installed is a membrane roof. It stretches over 3 suites, Suite 150, Suite 165, which houses ditch projects, and Suite 170, which is storage for the Eugene Opera. To eliminate a material transition right in the middle of the building, that membrane roof was brought to the edges of the entire structure. The project overview map in attachment 2, you can kind of see where the roofs are all shared in these 3 suites under one building. The roof costs $254,650. The prevailing wage differential for the roof work is an added cost of $1,300. So totaling, both of these come to $255,950. This cost is captured in the work letter agreement. I am here to request action to direct the city manager to enter or not enter into this lease agreement with Connected Lane County for Spark Suite 150.
Quick question.
Mhm.
Appreciate the information because you knew I was going to be asking about that.
Yep.
So one more related question to that space, that 3,000 square foot space. Are they going to be expecting us to provide a secure perimeter to that? Or if they're going to want that, it's going to be on them?
Any accommodations they want to make to it will need to go through a landlord review process and then any sort of land use or building permits associated with it. So it's on them.
So it's on them, but they still can come to us and ask us to pay for it, all right?
The cost has been carried by them for the tenant improvements for the rest of their space outside of the roof.
It's theirs, okay.
Mhm.
Perfect. I'm ready to make a motion. Okay, right. I'd like to make a motion to direct the city manager to enter into a lease amendment with Connected to Lane County for Spark at Booth Kelly Suite 150 to include additional outdoor space and coordinate payment of a building improvement.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Any other business from the city manager?
Yes, just briefly, we will be, not we, the city, there will be an event held on May 3rd at Heron Park to remember and honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women in our country and in our community. This has been organized by Marta Clifford, and a wonderful woman that I met, and I'm committed to attending. It's Willamette Lane has also been a partner in this by allowing them to do a ceremony at Heron Park on May 3rd at 5 p.m. So I just wanted to make the community aware of that. We've talked about human trafficking before and what an issue that is in our country. According to Marta, when I was talking to her, a lot of the victims of trafficking are Indigenous women, and they're underreported in the system. And because sometimes they may come from a sovereign tribal nation, they could literally slip through the cracks, and because they might not be tracked in other ways. So this is an important issue for Marta and certainly for me. And I just want to raise awareness about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is public hearings. You have four public hearings tonight. Public hearing number 1 is setting local and regional wastewater stormwater user fees effective July 1st, 2023. This is resolution number 2, a resolution of the city of Springfield setting local and regional wastewater sewer user fees and local stormwater drainage user fees as set forth in the Springfield Municipal Code. Matt Stouter is here for this item.
Good evening again. So each year, council considers user fees for regional and local wastewater systems, as well as the local stormwater system. Last week at work session, we presented options for council consideration and input. And we incorporated that feedback from last week into our discussion tonight. If approved, the proposed fiscal year 23-24 user fees will provide adequate revenues for us to continue to maintain and operate our systems, deliver reliable services for the Springfield community, fund our adopted CIP, maintain our debt service requirements, help us delay the need for future financing, meet environmental and regulatory requirements, and ensure protection of the public health in our local environment. So before council tonight, the user fees include a local stormwater fee increase of 3% or 48 cents per month on a local bill, a local wastewater increase of 2.5% or 0.63 cents per month, regional wastewater fee increase of 4.5% or $1.30 a month. And as noted previously, that regional increase was approved by the MWC Commission on April 14th after a public hearing. And so at this time, staff requests that the council hold a public hearing and consider adoption of a resolution establishing user fees to go into effect on July 1, 2023.
Any questions? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have any cards for this item. Neil, do we have anybody that's raised their hand online?
Appears we have no one online.
I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
The infamous resolution number 2 passes, 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
The next item is the fire code update. This is ordinance number 1, an ordinance adopting a fire code for the city of Springfield by adopting, amending, adding, and deleting sections to the state of Oregon 2022 fire code regulating and governing the safeguarding of life and property from fire and explosion hazards arising from the storage, handling, and use of hazardous substances, materials, and devices, and from conditions hazardous to life or property in the occupancy of buildings and premises as herein provided, providing for the issuance of permits and collection of fees therefore, and replacing ordinance number 6427 adopted June 28th of 2021 by the city of Springfield. Travis Worthington is here for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Travis Worthington for the Fire Department, Fire Marshal's Office. This ordinance would, this would help to put in effect the 22 Oregon Fire Code with amendments by the City of Springfield. Well, again, we have about 87 modifications to the fire code that we've identified that would better the community for Springfield and improve operations by the Fire Marshal's Office.
All right, any questions? I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. There's no cards for this item. Neil, do you have anybody raising their hand?
No one raising their hand.
I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and there's no action tonight. It is first reading only. Thank you. Next item, please.
Public hearing number 3 is an industrial pre-treatment code update. This is ordinance number 2, an ordinance repealing Springfield Municipal Code sections 4.002 to 4.094, adopting sections 4.001 to 4.085 relating to industrial pretreatment, adopting a severability clause, and providing an effective date. Sean Kruger is here for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to request that the council hold a public hearing and a first reading to consider an ordinance repealing Springfield Municipal Code sections 4.002 and 4.094 and adopting sections 4.01 to 4.085 relating to industrial pretreatment. As you may know, after a long process, the Oregon DEQ recently issued an MPDS wastewater discharge permit to the MWMC. The city of Springfield and the city of Eugene are also named on this permit. This permit became effective on November 1st, 2022, and requires the MWMC to update its model ordinance for pretreatment standards. It also requires the cities of Springfield and Eugene to update their local pretreatment ordinances. After working with DEQ and the two cities, the MWMC adopted their model ordinance and held a public hearing at the April 2023 commission meeting. Pursuant to the MWMC's intergovernmental agreement, the city of Springfield and Eugene might need to adopt at minimum the MWMC's model ordinance. City staff and city attorney's office have reviewed sections 4.002 to 4.094 of the municipal code with respect to the reissued MPDS permit requirements and the MWMC model ordinance. Since the city's code has not been updated since its adoption in 1997, the city's attorney's office has recommended repealing the existing code and adopting a new code based on the new MWMC model pretreatment ordinance. The city of Eugene has taken action on the same issue presently and will also be adopting the MWMC model ordinance in their local code. The changes to the new code are mostly non-substantial in nature and largely involve correcting terminology as well as adopting the code structure of the MWMC model ordinance, which is based on the EPA's current model ordinance template. These changes should result in requirements that are clearer for Springfield's industries and make future updates of the ordinance more streamlined. The MWMC held a public hearing and conducted a public notice process resulting from the updated model ordinance and received minor comments from industries that have been addressed. Staff also reached out to each industry that is permitted through our industrial pretreatment program, and no specific concerns were received with the proposed ordinance updates. Attachment 2 in your packet provides the updated ordinance if council has any questions. A second reading is scheduled for this item on May 15th, and upon council approval, the ordinance will become effective and review and approval by the Oregon DEQ. With that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? All right, I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have any cards for this item. Or is there anybody online, Neil?
No hands for this item.
I'm going to close the public hearing. There's no action tonight. This is first reading only. Thank you. Next item, please.
Your final public hearing tonight is fiscal year 23 appropriations transfer. This is resolution number 3, a resolution authorizing the transfer of appropriations within the Booth Kelly Fund from Development and Public Works Capital Project expense to Development and Public Works operating expense, and from contingency expense to Development and Public Works operating expense. Neil Obringer is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Neil Obringer, Budget and Procurement Manager in the Finance Department. This budget adjustment is being requested to provide budget authority for the roof replacement at Booth Kelly that Ally Camp discussed earlier. So DPW is actually absorbing the cost of this roof within their existing appropriations. This action only moves existing capital and contingency appropriations into their operating budget so that the purchase can all happen within one area of their budget. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions? I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have any cards for this item. Neil, do you have anybody online?
No hands for this item.
I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 3.
Second.
Neil, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Blackwell,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Aye.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Aye. Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos. Next item, please.
Next item is business from the audience.
I have 2 cards for in the room testimony, so please come forward and state your name for the record and location in the city, and then you have 3 minutes. Chris McAllister.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Chris McAllister. I come from Ward 3. John O'Neill is dead. John O'Neill lived and worked in Ward 3. John was a veteran of our country, served in the Vietnam era war. John is dead and died in Junction City, displaced because there's no place for him in Springfield. The marathon made it to where he could not even be in a hotel waiting for a replacement in a home. He had to go to Junction City. He did not die alone. He did not die suffering, but he is gone. He, like over 27 people since 2020, have passed away. People who are from our city. People claim 75% of the people come from other places. We have data 60 to 80%, depending on the year on the count, that people are coming from Oregon. They aren't coming from Portland. They're coming from Drain, Mapleton, Florence, Dune City even. We have the homeless by name list. It keeps track as best we can, but not everybody's willing to trust to talk to government to access service even. Because once you're on a list, it doesn't mean you go anywhere. It just means that you're remembered on a list. Years ago, we thought about trying to utilize Booth Kelly because it's one of the only places that actually qualifies for the car camping program that you use. We proposed it called Operation Last Stop, converting LTD buses into apartments. So that way we can take care of people, putting a fence around it, putting a structure in the middle with flowers, water, make people feel comfortable, have access to their caregivers. Because Booth Kelly is the only property you own that actually is allowed to be participant in the car camping program, we posed that. We were told that the leases could not be amended, that we can't. So seeing today that you were able to amend the lease, I'm hoping that maybe we can brainstorm a little bit about how to serve our people. I came to speak a little bit more about the hearing, but that appears to be on another day in regards to the camping van. I just want to say that I'm proud of our hired staff who have done so much in the past couple of years, from helping secure the memorial building when Springfield was going to be without a COVID prevention shelter, when everything was else locked down, that when the guest house closed, that our staff from the library to the finance to the housing and public works all rose and found solutions. I believe in the will of our people when they're directed and given license to serve. And so I hope that you continue to find ways to raise up your staff, to raise up your community, and to remember who we are. I spent 8 years on the streets in this town. As a 13-year-old to 22, I am here because a program was allowed to do something that it's not able to do now. Carry it forward, the organization that I am now honored to serve in and to lead at this point has been able to be the stopgap. I just ask that you remember John O'Neill and the over 27 people who have passed away since 2020 from Springfield. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you. Not yet, Steve. We'll come back. Hold that thought. You'll be the first for me.
Okay.
Last card is Angela Stout.
Good evening. My name is Angela Michelli Stout. I'm from Ward 6, and I am a member of the Springfield Public Library Advisory Board. And I'm here to offer a few updates to the council about the library and its programs over these past months. It's been just over a year that the library has been fine-free, and this has been a huge benefit to our entire library, the staff, our community, yours truly included. Our library staff tells us that they now spend far less time with upset patrons who have fines and blocked cards, and this has created a better work environment for our staff, who are now free to spend their time on other work projects and on helping patrons, again, like myself, finding really good books. So people are returning to the library without the fear of racking up fines they cannot afford to pay. There's just one anecdote that was given to me from a library staff member. The staff member recounted an inspiring comment from a new patron, a mother with a 6-year-old daughter. The mother says, "We just started coming to the library a few months ago. When I found out that there were no late fees, I stopped feeling anxious about going to the library, and now we come all the time. I couldn't believe the email said that we had another 3 weeks and it automatically renewed. It's amazing that we get to keep the books that long and not worry." The Library Advisory Board would like to thank the City Council for supporting the decision to go fine-free. The library has already seen an incredible benefit to the greater community and looks forward to serving Springfield even better. The library is also pleased that much of our youth programming has grown back to pre-pandemic levels. Our library is the only free early literacy program in the community, and we reach out to hundreds of children each month. The Springfield Library Storytime has grown over the last year with a baby and preschool storytime on Tuesdays, with about 70 children and their caregivers in attendance. And Wednesday and Saturday offer a bilingual storytime that brings together many community members. Over spring break at the end of March, the library was packed, as you may have seen. With support from SUB, the library was able to provide many fun, educational, free programs for children and their families. Just a few highlights: 613 free books given out in English and Spanish. 166 children and their families attended the Spring Film program. That was a collaboration with the Wildish, Willamette, and Planktown. And finally, there were 675 children and their adults at the Reptile Man show, which was wild, and we had to add a third show. The library board is very grateful for the continued support of this council and very grateful for the opportunity to serve our community. And should the city council hope to pack these chambers, we might suggest inviting the Reptile Man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Council response, Steve?
Chris McAllister, the gentleman he talked about that died was 2 days ago, a veteran. Chris called me on Saturday, asked me if there's anything I could do, and I couldn't. And I'm so sorry, Chris.
Corey?
I want to thank everyone for coming and testifying and sharing in public comment. I very much appreciate Chris reminding us that the unhoused people in our community are the unhoused people in our community. There's often a myth that everyone is, the term transient gets used and people come from other places. And the fact is, people are in the communities that they live in, that they have ties to, their families are here, they may move in and out of housing. And I just appreciate Chris continually reminding us that these people are part of our communities as well, and they are not necessarily coming from somewhere else. And my deep condolences for the loss of another neighbor. And I also am so supportive of Fine Free and love, Angela, that you brought up all the ways that, families, it has erased that anxiety and given people access to the library. As someone who had kiddos who were constantly having overdue books and then couldn't go to the library for a year, I just really appreciate that we have moved in this direction. So thank you for both of those messages.
Just one quick comment, Chris. I know that, there's a lot of medical respite issues that are tied up in this particular occurrence. No, I would just encourage you to take that story and reach out to the administration at the hospitals. I think there's some details in that you shared with me that really would help them as they start to do work around understanding medical respite and making sure that people transition appropriately, including into hospice. So please don't let us be the only person that is hearing that story. Make sure that you're reaching out to the people that are doing the work around medical respite. And one quick comment about the library board. My kids loved the Reptile Man, and I also want to say that I am grateful that the same amount of reptiles left here is that we're in here. All right, next item, please.
And just for the record, there were no hands raised for business from the audience.
Oh, well, thank you.
No problem. Next item is business from the city council.
Does anybody have business? All right, I have one easy one and then one particularly hard one. We're packing desserts for dinner this Friday. So if you've bought a dessert for dinner, make sure you swing by on Saturday between 10 and 12, which is the Catholic Community Service or the G Street location is on G Street. I'm a riot this time of night. The second thing we want to pull back and talk about is timing and location around for council retreat. So when we had agenda review on Friday, we're going to have to reschedule the council retreat. AJ is going to send out a survey, everybody's favorite doodle poll. The best option for everybody, if we do not want to do this thing in the middle of August, it sounds like it is June 24th. And I don't know if somebody had an issue, but I would strongly encourage you. Saturday. Thank you. Does anybody know if they've got an issue around June 24th? I thought it was the 17th.
17th to the 12th.
Aha. We were trying to think of where the.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We will.
On the week before, the 11th through the 17th.
Okay. So we're going to try to put this thing out there for probably middle July. Like what I want to do is make sure. What? That is during break. This is.
We're gonna dock your pay.
No. We'll triple it. Fall is going to be pretty full. It would be really helpful for us as a body to be able to pull back and have this conversation and before we get into the middle of the fall part of the season. So look for that, answer it, and hopefully we can find a date. Anybody else with business from the council? All right, next item, please.
Any business from the city attorney?
No business, thank you.
All right. Considering how much we got done, and it's before 8 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn us. Thank you, everybody. Well, they always print it. He's got a script.
Lady.